Whether you're stuck at 225, chasing 315, get back here, you little wire, or eyeing up 405 on the bench mountain high, you've come to the right place. A lot of lifters tend to stall out around these bench milestones. And whether these specific numbers apply to you or not, we're gonna go through 3 tiers of advice for novice, intermediate, and advanced lifters to help you break whatever bench plateau you're up against. Level 1, 225. If you've been training your bench seriously and caring about your strength and numbers for a little while, and 225 or whatever that first milestone is still giving you some troubles, well, here's some things you should know. Firstly, bench more to bench more. It sounds silly, it sounds straightforward, it sounds perhaps redundant, but what I'm talking about here is frequency. If you're only benching 1 or 2 times a week, the easiest way to level up your bench press is gonna be to simply expose yourself to bench press more often. As a more novice trainee, you can afford to and get away with just doing the bench press. You probably don't need many variations, if any, and you can probably bench anywhere from 3 to, on the upper end, 4 times a week. The second thing, and this is slept on at all levels, is to eat your bench up. What I mean by that is focus in on your nutrition. One of the first things a lot of lifters notice if, for example, they cut down a weight class, is that their bench is the first thing to be impacted. If you're not, at the very least, getting sufficient protein in your day, you're really selling yourself short on bench progress. Even if you're not okay with gaining weight and maybe your training is a vehicle for you to actually lose weight, ensuring that you have an adequate intake of protein throughout your day is by far one of the easiest boxes to check off to ensure that you're gonna make some good bench progress. And conversely, if you're somebody who's looking to gain size and strength, eating in a surplus, it's gonna be one of the surefire ways to increase your bench. And rule number 3, don't fuck it up.
Don't fuck it up.
And what I mean by that is be conscious of your technique. Try to improve your technique and be more efficient. If you want an in-depth guide to bench technique, you can check out our comprehensive bench guide, and that video is gonna be posted on the screen here somewhere or in the description box below. Another thing that's really useful is to scope out other lifters that are similar to your size and shape, who are very good at bench press, and mimic them to an extent. See what kinds of things they're doing and try those out as cues for yourself to see if you can improve how you're benching. And finally, if you just want some quick, easy bench tips, we got a couple here. Firstly, use your back. The muscles of your upper back should be actively locking your shoulder blades into place to increase the stability of you while you bench press. Also, use your legs. Your legs should be driving into the floor, pushing you up the bench to again help improve and increase stability. Lastly, not specifically a technique thing, but more just how you should be executing, pause your benches. At least some of the time. Pausing on your chest is gonna make you a stronger bench presser. It's gonna make you stronger off the chest, which is where most people are weakest, and it'll give you a substantial advantage in pushing your bench forwards because of that strength in the weak spot. My final piece of advice here is to stop maxing out so often. If you attempt this new milestone bench and miss 225 every other week, that's not training, that is just lifting poorly. Don't do it. If you wanna max out, and you do, I know you do, I do, everybody does, plan it. Don't do it more than every 12 weeks. As you get more and more advanced, you're probably gonna wanna test less often than that, but as a general novice, probably every 12 weeks is realistic. You can see some progress, and don't be afraid to use the smallest increments possible. You don't have to jump 10 pounds just to set a new PR. You can jump 5 pounds. I know that sounds strange, but the 2.5 plates exist, and you should use them. And now, level 2, 315. So if you're chasing down a 315 bench or whatever your intermediate milestone number may be, and wouldn't you believe it, I've got some good advice for you too. Now listen carefully. You'll have to bench even more than more to bench more. Think about it. If the answer to benching more is to bench more, and you want to bench more, but you've already benched more, you got to bench even more than when you bench more to bench more. It's pretty straightforward. What I'm talking about here is continuing to add some frequency, continuing to add some volume. However, as you approach a more intermediate phase in your training, you're gonna have to do so in an intelligent and mindful way. What I'm talking about here is picking and choosing where you're going to have your higher intensity sessions and which of those now increased number of sessions is going to be intentionally lower intensity. So you're gonna have some sessions where you push harder and some sessions where you just go in and get volume in. It's also probably around this point where you want to start thinking about utilizing some different accessory and variation movements for the bench press. Basically, now that you're training with heavier loads, some of what worked in the past may not work the same anymore. So what this boils down to is that we want to add more volume, more frequency, but we have to do so in a mindful way because as we're training with heavier loads, we necessarily must become more mindful of our recovery. Number 2, reduce, refine, and refrigerate. Number 2, reduce, refine, and move better. Continue to work on honing and refining your technique, working out those individual differences that might make sense for you but don't make sense for another lifter. If you haven't watched the definitive guide that I mentioned earlier, please go do that. It explains everything. There are multiple different ways of benching correctly, and you should investigate which of those is better for you. Are you better suited for a consistent leg drive or for a jolty sort of hip thrust to get the bar started off your chest? Should you be touching heavier and sinking a little bit, or should you be in full control and barely touch your t-shirt? What about your grip width? Is it too wide, too narrow? If you move it by a finger, are you more comfortable? Are you stronger? These are the questions you need to be asking, and you should be exploring these things to further refine your technique if you want to push things to the next level. The third thing here is to mix it up a little. Variations become increasingly more important when we get to this stage in our lifting. Previously, when we're aiming for that 225 mark, we can get away with just doing the bench press. We probably are better off just doing the bench press in that case because we need more practice with the movement. But now that we have the movement down more, we want to start targeting parts of the movement. Again, we've got a great video on my top 5 bench accessories, when you might want to use them, how to implement them, all that kind of stuff. Maybe we'll put it on the screen, maybe it's in the description, I don't know yet. Using variations is a great way to target different parts of the range of motion, different parts of the movement, and choosing these movements that are self-limiting because they're hard at a certain point or because they teach a certain quality is a really good way to continue to compound on the gains that you make in your technique. Now, if you're somebody who is at this sort of more intermediate stage of your lifting, it's probably a good time to be thinking about something like, oh, I don't know, getting a coach, like one of the fantastic coaches at Calgary Barbell, or honing in and fine-tuning your nutrition with Derek or Danny, our fantastic nutrition coaches, or hopping onto the Calgary Barbell app where you get access to over 50 programs, including one that I recently built specifically as a bench plateau buster. Look where we are. We're trying to break bench plateaus, are we not? With the app, you'll get access to the Discord community, to weekly check-ins from myself, feedback on your lifts and techniques, and whether or not you're overshooting. We help with that. Anyways, you can check all that stuff out at calgarybarbell.com. Let's get on to the rest of the video. Okay, Dylan really wanted me to say that the Discord community for the Calgary Barbell app is more supportive than your mom. Moving on. And now we come to the last boss of bench press, at least for a lot of people, 405. All right, so coming up against the more advanced milestone that you've set for yourself, whether that's 405 or whatever, Here are some sort of final tips to push you past that level of ascension, to help you level up into your final form, unlock your final class, and evolve into the Charizard that you were born to be. All right, so my first tip here, I know I talked a lot more about benching more to bench more and then benching more than more and blah, blah, blah. But now I'm gonna flip it on you, because sometimes less is more. When you get to these advanced stages of lifting, sometimes you need even more to separate out the work in terms of where you can actually afford to push hard, how frequently you can afford to push hard, how much of your volume is gonna be split between the competition lift and even very non-specific accessories like direct tricep work or cable flies and things like that. Yes, we need progressive overload. Yes, we probably need more stimulus to get to 405 than we did to get to 315, but if we try to do it the exact same way and just hammer the bench pattern itself, we might be missing out on gains, and we may also just end up overtraining and injuring ourselves. So at this point, it becomes more important than ever to be individualized, to make sure that the plan makes sense to you and for you. Things start to get a little loosey-goosey in terms of what might look like logical programming as we become a more and more advanced lifter. It becomes a more complex Rubik's Cube to solve. Each Rubik's Cube has a different set of colors, and some of them have 7 sides. I don't know. It gets complex. Piggybacking a little bit off of the last one, you gotta be taking your programming seriously. You need to be recording what you're doing in each session. You probably need to be familiar with and rating RPEs and looking at estimated 1-rep maxes in order to ascertain the effective quality of the amount of work that you're doing on a given day. You should be recording your sets to further refine your technique, or maybe not. Maybe you're a football freak or a SARM goblin and you just walked into the gym and you benched 405 and that was no problem for you, or your uncle or your brother's girlfriend's former roommate from college did, or whatever. This video is not for those people. I'm speaking more directly to those people that need to do all of these extra things. I understand that some people might be gifted benchers. They might not struggle to get to 405. That's fine. Congrats. For those people that this advice is for, you're gonna need to pay special attention to your programming. You're gonna need to think big picture, which I think is my next point. Point number 3, think big picture. A lot of the times when we get to the sort of bleeding edge of progress, whatever that might be for you, we need to start zooming out a little bit. Things aren't always going to trend upwards on a week-to-week basis. When you're a novice lifter and you can just do 3x5 for 4 months and put 20 kilos on all your lifts, that's pretty cool. You squat on Monday, and then you squat on Wednesday and your squat gets better, and then you squat on Friday and your squat gets better. That's not the case with advanced lifters. A lot of the times we need to zoom out and think more about maybe these pretty convoluted looking up and down patterns, and think long-term, are we moving in the right direction? And again, this goes back to analyzing your progress and analyzing your programming and all those kinds of things, but you may need different periods of time where a specific phase focuses on a specific quality in the bench press. Maybe we're training variation movements or accessory movements harder or more intensely than the competition bench for a period of time, with the intent being that it pays off in the long run. That's why it's important that we zoom out. And while things might look a little convoluted or seem a bit illogical in the short term, we have to think about the contributions to long-term progress, because that's what we're talking about when we're getting into the higher ends of strength development. A good phrase that I've heard mostly from Taylor at Calgary Barbell is to think in months and years, not days and weeks. I don't think that's his original, but he uses it a lot, and I'm gonna go ahead and credit him for it. To wrap it all up, wherever you're at, I hope that this advice has been helpful. Whether your milestones are 225, 315, and 405, or whether there's something completely different based on your journey, hopefully you can use these tips to progress further, to break some plateaus, And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Bye.